Okay. Okay, welcome everybody. Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, the abridged code of Jewish law. We're up to chapter 29, Perek Chav Tes, Sivan Chav Tes, and number 8, Siv Ches. Okay, so we're discussing different character traits or character development, the way a person is meant to behave and look at things and view things. We said generally people should take the middle of the road, not extremes. Not have extremes. So ches number 8. Chava Kasavna, we already have written. All right, so we had it in the first chapter. Ma'ami Yehuda ben Taima, the teaching that Rabbi Yehuda ben Taima said. He says, Avi az k'nem v'chulu. All right, so it said the detail of what he said that we're going to discuss is be as bold as a leopard. What does this mean? Person should not be embarrassed, not should be ashamed in front of people who make fun of him that he worships Hashem. Just had Shavuos, and we know that Hashem chose Har Sinai, Mount Sinai, because it was a small mountain. It showed humility. So, of course, the obvious question: if you want to show humility, why mountain at all? Given a valley, right? Because to be a Jew, you have to be a mountain. You have to either go against the tide. You're identifiably Jewish in the street. You need to. Many of our values are not the same as mainstream society's values, and we have to be able to stand up for what we believe. To be a Jew, you have to be a mountain, but be a small mountain. Don't get too carried away with ourselves. We're not being a doormat. We have to be a mountain. And there'll be times when we're traveling, and we're going to daven, put on talis to fill in the airport, and various things. And someone might stare, but we can't be embarrassed. We need to, as an example. So this is what it is. But even though we're not to be embarrassed, you shouldn't answer a person rudely. All right? So someone might make a comment, and we're not meant to be embarrassed. But we don't start being cheeky or rude back. Why? We don't want to acquire the negative trait of being impertinent, being a smart aleck in other areas. So even though in this particular case it could be appropriate to give a certain sharp answer back, and there are times where one needs to defend Judaism, but generally speaking, a person shouldn't. I think I've shared the story before. With Meir Shapiro, right? It's a famous pre-war rabbi. We founded the famous yeshiva. Yeshivas Chochmei Lublin, was for the elite. He started the Daf Yomi. So he was also a member on behalf of the Gudas Yisrael party. He was a member of the Polish government. He was in the Sejm. And one time when he was in parliament, a Polish nationalist, an anti-Semite, he said to Ramesh Shapiro, says, just 10 years ago there was a sign on this building, no dogs or Jews allowed. So Ramesh Shapiro, without a blink, just replied, oh, so neither of us could have come in then. There is a time and a place. But generally we want to avoid giving a rude reply to things, even though it might be justified. But what happens is people get involved in certain behaviors, it can start to become their second nature. And it's so important to us that we don't take on negative characteristics, that even to defend ourselves a little bit, sometimes it's best not to rudely. Let's answer rudely. It doesn't mean there shouldn't be an answer. It doesn't mean that we can't, I think some of the organizations that try to defend the Jewish community from anti-Semitism perhaps make the situation worse with their responses and different things. But we can have organizations that or individuals who respond and try and do things, but always still with a certain dignity. Okay, test number 9. V'chein, likewise. Ein
Rabbi,
hiskait, yeah,
a quick question. Two things actually. Number 8, this be bold as a leopard. In the right in the beginning of the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, that's in law number 3.
yeah,
But I think in the big Shulchan Aruch, it's the beginning how the Shulchan Aruch starts.
yeah. That's how the
So
Torah
why,
starts, and then
yeah.
they all bring it.
So why is
Yeah.
that the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch brings it as number 3, and they all bring it in the original Shulchan Aruch as number 1?
You want to discuss something else first? You want to discuss how a person should always have, you should keep in mind that Hashem is in front of you at all times. Now, the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, I guess, is um, called the regular person. I mean, that was the purpose of the Shulchan Aruch also, but in his generation, which I guess applies to us as well, he wanted to give a what he felt was the underlying principle of everything. If you can honestly feel that you're in Hashem's presence, that's going to affect everything you do, everything you say, the way you behave, the way you conduct yourself. So that was what he chose to speak about first.
Okay. And the second thing is you were saying about Rabbi Meir Shapiro. I
Yeah,
saw I saw a story about him. Yeah, I think it's in this book, uh, Tales of, what was it called? Hasidic Tales of the Holocaust. So the story is that he was taken out to be shot along with other Jews, and he all through the camp he had this one Jew that he had been back and forth, back and forth. He was trying to bring closer this non-religious Jew, and the guy was arguing with him constantly, and he was a non-believer. So he said he was a non-believer. So when it came time to where they were going to be shot, they were taken to the edge of this ditch, and they were told, whoever, if you want to survive, you have to jump the width of the ditch. Otherwise, you're going to be shot. And the width of the ditch was very, very long. So the story is that he closed his eyes and he jumped as far as he could, and he made it to the other side. And when he looked and he davened to Hashem that that I should be saved in the merit of Avram Yitzchak, of my forefathers. And he jumped as far as he could, and miraculously he made it to the other side. And when he looked, the guy that had been arguing with him the whole time, he made it also to the other side. So he said to Rabbi Shapiro, he said, "How did you make it?" He said, "I was holding on to the strings of my forefathers, of our forefathers, to make it to the other side." He says, "How did you make it?" He says, "I was holding on to you."
there we go. Probably a different Rabbi Shapiro. That was a very famous rabbinical family because Shapiro he passed away for the war years
Oh,
before, but
before the
it's
war.
a incredible
Oh,
story. Yeah,
oh,
yeah. It's I
okay.
think 36. I think he was something like that, but he was or earlier. But it was was a very famous family, very famous rabbinic family. It's he announced actually that when there was also Rebbes in his family that he announced at one stage when he turns 50, he's going to start being a Rebbe. And he passed away at 48 or something like that. So one of his cousins who was a Rebbe said to him, we finally have a decent Rav in the family. Why spoil becoming a Rebbe? So he said to him, so soon we'll have a decent Rebbe also. you know, little cousinly banter there. But anyway, that's what happened. So test number 9. So we're in chapter 29, number 9. V'chein ein this kaite b'shel eza mitzvah. Also, a person shouldn't quarrel over a mitzvah. In other words, the right to perform a mitzvah. If you're going, for example, this palafnei teva to lead the services, or alis the Torah kadimo to get called up. Right? So very often in our eagerness to do a mitzvah, and we want to be able to do it properly, sometimes the Yetzer Hara can get us all, worked up about how important the mitzvah is, and we can end up fighting with each other about how or when or if to do a mitzvah, who should do it, and of course ends up defeating the purpose. Right? If the Yetzer Hara comes and says, go worship idols, who's going to listen? The Yetzer Hara likes to try and make us feel very righteous, like we're big tzaddik, and we're fighting for the honor of Hashem. Yeah, sometimes we are fighting for the honor of Hashem, but we have to really try and sit and think at times, what's really motivating me? What's the source? Is it really from our godly soul, or is it from the animal soul? We have to really think, and sometimes it's not clear. Just by the way, sometimes it's not clear. There's not to do with fighting over a mitzvah, just this idea. Chernobyl at one time he was a student of Baal Shem Tov, the Maggid Mezrich. Was a time someone came to him and sorry, Susan, you have a question? Yeah.
Yes, it makes good. I feel good when I help somebody. Is that the wrong way to feel?
No. Well, first of all, it's like this. Even if someone helps somebody totally selfishly to make themselves feel good, then that's certainly better than not helping somebody, and it's a good stepping stone. But I'm presuming that's not what you mean. You don't mean the only. So what happens is when we do something good, we feel a sense of fulfillment, and true happiness is from having a fulfilled life. That's what gives true, fulfilling relationships and having a fulfilled, meanful life.
So
And
it's
so
not
when we do the
improper
right
thinking. I'm not thinking improperly, or
no, if it's all about me and I do it because it makes me feel good, then it's still better than not doing it, but it might need some character improvement. But if it's you're helping the person and afterwards because you did something positive and it's meaningful and therefore you feel a sense of fulfillment which brings true happiness, then that's a good sign. That's good. And it's not the story I was going to tell, but there's another famous story. There was there was a king that was always miserable, right? And I believe it's a parable of the story. I don't think it's a true story, but he was always miserable, and he called all his jesters and his musicians, and at best they made him happy for 5 minutes, and sometimes not even for that. They just felt like, and he was offering rewards for who can make him happy. And different people came and they weren't successful. One wise man came and he said, you really want to feel happiness? Do things to help others. Help others. And that was what brings happiness because leading a fulfilled life, a meaningful life, that's what brings happiness. People who try to escape reality into movies and substances and various things, they might feel a certain happiness for a few minutes, but that's not. But right afterwards, they're full of emptiness again. So I have to find something else. While true happiness is doing things that are meaningful and feeling fulfilled. They say you. Anyway, so that's back to the story we're going to tell. So the Shlomo, he someone came to him and he needed money to marry off his daughter. He didn't have the money, and whatever the sum was, so the Shalom says he'll try and help, and she'll come back in a day or two, whatever he said. The next person that came in gave him money to distribute the tzedakah, the exact amount that the first guy needed, the previous person needed. So he says, "Oh, Baruch Hashem." And he was just about to send someone to call the person back and give them money. Then he had a thought. Maybe instead of giving one person all the money they need, I should give several people part of the money they need and help several people part way, which is also could be good. So he stopped seeing people for a while and he sat and he really thought about it. And then he called back the first person, he gave him the money. And the guy asked him what happened, and he told him the story, what happened. And he realized that the thought to help several people did not come from a good source, came from the answer because it came afterwards. If when he was originally thinking, what should I do with the money, he had the two choices, then that would be one discussion. But being that he'd already made a positive decision to help one person, the fact that it came afterwards, he realized that this didn't come from a good source. So we have to try and be sincere in what we do. But if afterwards, when we do something properly, we do the right thing, when we feel a sense of fulfillment and a meaningful life, which is what brings true happiness, and helping others brings true happiness, then true happiness is all fine. That's good.
Question.
Yeah.
What if, I mean, if the exact amount came for a particular individual, isn't that can't you assume that it's ordained to go to this particular individual? And so why would you then come along and decide to make a change when that's not
The thought came, and it's good to examine our thoughts. I mean, I hear what you're saying, but I think at a certain point, you could argue the pros and cons of both methods. Helping one person, yes, and seemingly you got the right amount in one shot, but there are other people who needed things, and maybe if you contribute to several people, get them on their way, and then they can go get. The different definitely is there's reason to consider each option. Just you have to see where it comes from. Is the thought coming from a good place, from the right place? Okay, so we shouldn't argue over who gets to do mitzvahs. And the classic example of not arguing, well, we see actually both the positive and the negative. We find what happened to lechem aponim. The lechem aponim, they call it the showbread. It means the bread that's available. It means the face. It was in the public. So the showbread in the Beis Hamikdash, there was a table, and each week 12 loaves were put on the table each Shabbos, and there always had to be loaves on it. So even when they replaced the loaves, didn't take the old ones off and put the new ones, they started to slide the new ones, and this would slowly push the old ones off. So you always had a full loaf, part of one, part of the other, till they came off, and each Shabbos came the fresh ones, and then the previous weeks were handed out, and whichever kahanim, whichever families were on duty, it would be distributed amongst the kahanim, and they would eat it. Side point, it was a miracle. It was fresh, even though it was a week old bread. It was still fresh, like it just been baked. But so what do we see? Afshehu mitzvah achloi. Now, even though there's a mitzvah to eat it, so many kahanim there. I don't think you got that full from eating a little piece of bread, at least not according to law's nature. So, someone who's wants lunch, it wasn't the place to go to. Why do you eat it? It was for the mitzvah. But what do we see? Shnino, we're taught the following: the modest people, literally, but in other words, the people who wanted to do the right thing, they would literally take their hand away. But in other words, they gave up their share at times because it was, some people were pushing and different things. While the gluttons used to grab and devour it. Right? So even though there were some people who were behaving improperly, missing the point, right? The whole point of the mitzvah is not to be selfish and to grab and devour like a glutton. But there were people who realized, it's best. I'm not going to get into the push and the shove. I'm gonna let it go. Yes, Mordechai.
Yeah, this thing with the modest Kohanim reminds me. Isn't there also a story about that there were these Kohanim where the portion they got, I guess because of them there being many Kohanim, was very small, and there was one who said that one of them said, I got one like the size of a bean, and the other one said, I got one the size of a lizard's tail, and they investigated and found out that he wasn't a kosher Kohen because he
Yeah,
had.
that's right, because he was describing holy things in a inappropriate manner. Right, it's another thing. I mean, here with this chapter, we have to be careful about how we speak. Okay, so that's the showbread. So that's an example, and it's best sometimes to let things go. Let things go. It's
Well, it
at the end
continues
of the
today
yeah.
with
So
Shirayim. It's the same thing
right.
with Shirayim.
So it depends where you go. So the shrine, for those haven't had the experience, we know when in every object there's godly sparks, and when you utilize something properly, you elevate those godly sparks. So included that is food. In the food is godly sparks, and if you eat with the appropriate intentions and you say the intention to serve Hashem, and you're sincere and you say the blessings or the appropriate kavan intention, you elevate the sparks in the food, and it has a certain level of holiness. And so many people, certain communities, a tzaddik or a great person, they're given a very large serving of the food, way more than they're ever going to eat, and through the blessing they make and the eating, they elevate the sparks in this food, and then the rest is handed out to the people that are there, and it's called shiraim. Literally, it means leftovers, but they hand it out, and people try to eat it. It's to put food that's been elevated within themselves. So that's so in some places people push and they try and grab. There's certain places where it's not the case. So beyond this example, if anyone pushes, it all comes back. No one gets. That's. But there are certain places, yeah. Anyway, Yud. Number 10. Teva Adam. Now, human nature. So just give a little introduction here. The fact is, we are a composite being. We're part spiritual. We have a soul that's a piece of God, and we're part animal. And we have a physical body that's just an intelligent mammal, and we have an animal soul that's through which the godly soul interacts with our physical body. Now, we are born animal soul dominant, right? And we discussed this before. This is why a baby, the slightest thing, the slightest discomfort, it starts crying. You can imagine if you had this very spiritually developed and refined baby, and it's hungry, and it says, it decides, I don't want to disturb anyone, so I'll just wait patiently. God forbid that baby, it's not going to be a happy ending, right? The baby needs to be animal dominant. That's why we're born that way. But we can't just leave our nature. There's a lot of things going on in the world today, and people, different lifestyles, different things. People saying, "Oh, it's natural." They've got a tendency. It's natural. Now, look, It's like this. May or may not be natural. It could be for some people it is, and some people it's just because it's become trendy. But even if certain things are natural, that doesn't make it right. There's certain people who are born with a tendency that if someone looks them the wrong way, they kill them. They beat them up. They have anger issues. They're born that way. We don't say to people, oh, you're born that way. It's natural. Oh, that's fine. You just go around your merry way and do whatever you like. We don't say that. We say to the person, you have to learn self-control. You have to learn different tactics, when you start feeling heated, how you're going to respond, or you need to leave the room, whatever it is. We expect certain things from a person, right? We expect people to do the work on themselves. A temper tantrum from a 2-year-old, not that we just let it go by, but it's developmentally appropriate. That's how it works. And so we train the child to deal with things differently as they develop. If an adult would have a meltdown like a 2-year-old, we don't accept it. We don't accept it. It's a person has to be able to deal with things, and even the little child was saying, use your words. Just tell what the problem is. We're training the person. So people have all kind of nature. Our teva, the way we're born, the animal side of ourselves. Our goal, though, is to make ourselves spiritual. Just to use a parable, if you have a wild stallion, right? So it's a wild animal. The person gets close, they get injured, can attack them. But if a person tames that animal and trains it, then the person can ride the stallion. They can go further than they can on their own. They can go faster. They can carry more weight. Becomes their partner. So our animal part of us is very powerful. It's very passionate. It has drive. And if we can tame it and make it our partner, we can accomplish so much more. And that's our goal. But number 10, Teva Adam is Nimshach B'masav Achareya V'Chavrav Anshe Mekoimai. The human nature is a person is influenced by their friends, their say colleagues, for lack of a better word, people you interact with, and the people of your place. A part of our nature is whatever's the norm in a certain place, that's what becomes normal for you. So, we have in certain parts of the world, the way that people dress is not the way that the Torah encourages us, to put it mildly. It's some people don't dress up to go out, they dress down, God forbid. So what happens is that becomes the norm in people, in society's eyes, and people who live in a society. The nature is to think, well, if everyone's doing that, then that must be normal. And when they try to have certain levels of modesty, of refinement, they sometimes question themselves. Am I maybe I'm the one who's crazy, right? And the way that people speak in certain environments, the language, not only words that are spoken, but the topics of things that are spoken. In different societies, it's not quite the way that we would like. So the fichach, therefore, tzarich adam l'schaber l'tzadikim. People should try and connect and be with people who are tzadikim, either literally or at least relatively. Leishev eitzel chomim tomid, and to always try and be in the company of scholars. In other words, if you try and associate with, if you want to have certain character traits, you want then yourself to feel that Judaism is important. So you associate with people where Judaism is important, and then you're using your human nature for the positive. Okay, that's not to say, just as a side point to this, we know the Ramsha send out shluchim to places where they'd be the only Jewish person with a Jewish mindset, at least initially, and although other people may have been aware they're Jewish. Some people may have been culturally Jewish, but very few people were spiritually Jewish in the place where they went. And, it sort of went there. And seems to be the opposite of what was being met here. But the whole point was that the shluchim should go there and not be influenced by their situation. Instead, they should be the ones that create the atmosphere for the other people to be influenced. And we see, generally speaking, it worked. It does work. Right? We have whole communities that are transformed, individuals that are transformed. But if we're not doing that, we should try and be in a place where we're going to have a positive influence. These classes are a wonderful example. And but there's other things, so if a person wants to grow, they should try and attend to be part of a congregation that people are looking to grow, not people that are just always going to be individuals, but I'm saying, but if the congregation as a whole is just, we're all happy where we are, and we don't want to change, and we don't want anything to be different, and we're just happy to plod along and go our merry way and never leave our comfort zone. And someone who wants to grow, that's not the crowd they're looking for. Okay. So we should try and be in positive company. Yisrach min rashoim holchem b'choshech. And we should try and stay away from rashoim. Now, we'll come back to that term in a moment, but we're going to say the people who literally walk in darkness. So we shouldn't learn from their ways. Now, most people today who are not really observing their Judaism, they're not really involved. Majority of people today, I don't think it's not an act of rebellion against God. Majority of people today they don't really know any better. They haven't had the proper education. They haven't had the proper exposure. Even if they've had some exposure, they've grown up in a society where so many things, even though they're wrong, but they're considered normal in the society. So in their mind, this seems to be normal. And it's people who it's people who life has just overtaken them. They've gotten so bogged down in various things in life. They don't have the time to think and to grow. And so majority of people today, not necessarily you need to stay away from them. Maybe you need to be the positive influence for them and to try and encourage them to get involved in things and so they can grow. They can get a different perspective and they can see, wow, this is what Judaism really says. I never knew that. They often unfortunately there's many organizations that pretend to represent Judaism. They call themselves a denomination or various things, but there's really no such thing. And what they're teaching is the opposite of Judaism. And you have a lot of people grow up in these environments, and they find it totally unfulfilling and totally meaningless, and they even start searching elsewhere. They say in America, 60% of non-Asian Buddhists are Jewish, right? Because you have people who they grow up in these places, and there's no spirituality there, and they think that Judaism doesn't offer spirituality, and they go and look elsewhere. Unfortunately, little do they know the things they're attracted to are actually Judaism has an even better version. But that's how it goes. So many people we don't necessarily have to stay away from. We might want to be a positive influence to them. But when talking about Rishoyim is a very, very, very harsh word. So I know you're going to translate as an evil person, but what it means is someone who does know, and they're deliberately and actively rebelling against what's right. So one of the classic examples, often brought down in Jewish sources, is Yerovam ben Nevat. I think maybe those who got to the Tanakh class have learned about him. When it was or maybe not up to there yet. The split after King Solomon passed away, the split of the kingdom. So he was someone that at a certain point was actually a great person. And they had the potential to really be someone special. But what ended up happening is they blinded themselves with self-interest. So they got to a point that the Jewish kingdom split into two. And he's got 10 tribes. And he's thinking to himself, if the Jewish people go for the 3 festivals to Jerusalem, as they're meant to, the Torah says, and he knew that was the truth. He knew Torah was true. He knew that was the mitzvah. But he started to think to himself, they're going to go to my competition king's capital. He's allowed to sit there. I'm going to have to stand. Everyone's going to realize he's the real king. And he allowed this, his ego to cloud his vision. And he closed the border. He put guards on the border. They killed people who tried to cross the border to go for the festivals. And to provide an alternative, he set up temples with golden calves and told the people, this is your God, go there instead. Now, it wasn't because he believed it. We're not, God forbid, we're not going to say J for J, guys, these are good. It's what they're trying to teach is terrible. But you can have a person, he really believes it. Now, he's wrong. Just because he believes it doesn't make him right. He really believes it. He's totally wrong. What he's doing is wrong. But when he tries to share it with others, although that's a bad thing to share, he means well. He's just misguided. He's wrong. He's been misled. But this guy, Yeravam, he knew it was wrong. He wasn't like he really honestly believed in golden calves and he tried to share that with people. He knew it was rubbish. He knew what the truth was. But for his own self-purposes, for his own political expediency, to make himself greater in the public eye, he misled the masses. And that's an example of what Judaism calls a Rasha. Someone who knows and still does things for all the wrong reasons. Not necessarily someone who does wrong things thinking that it's not wrong. So someone who's misguided, maybe we can be good influence. So Amar Shlomo Melech Shalom. So King Solomon said like this: Hoylech es chacham ichkom. He says like this: someone who walks with a chacham, he walks with a wise man, he becomes wise. But if he hangs out with the is a friend with the fools, so he'll end up ruining himself. Right? So this is this idea of trying to be with the right type of people. And it also says with the same idea in Psalms, Ashra Ishu Goyme. Right? Fortune is the person who doesn't follow the advice of the Rishonim, and instead he's with the right type of people. If a person lives in a place where the people conduct themselves in terrible ways, and there's no one there who lives properly, he should leave that place, and he should go to a place where there's good people. Now, usually in every city, there's somewhere where there's good people, but one of the rare exceptions of Jewish history was Sodom, right? There was a place you couldn't even find out of 5 major cities that came together like as a city-state. You couldn't find 8 decent people. That's pretty sad. There weren't even 8 decent people. So there weren't 9 decent people. There was only 8. So a maximum. So this is, if a person can't find people to be with, again, it's one of the advantages today. Pretty much everywhere you live in the world, there's a Chabad house or something there, and people can find people that can be a good influence. Yod number 10. Mitzvah asek lidabek v'tamid chomim k'dei lilmud ma'asehim. There's a positive mitzvah to cleave to Talmid Chomim. We're going to loosely translate as Torah scholars, and I'll say why in a minute. It's not the exact translation, but we want to cleave to these people, want to be close to them, to learn from their ways. So just before we go further, just to explain this idea of a Talmid Chacham. So again, generally we translate as a Torah scholar, and that's true to a large extent. But it's interesting, all other professions, Talmid Chacham literally means a student of wisdom. That's what it means literally. So normally, when someone achieves something, they become a scholar, you don't call them the student. You have someone, he's an apprentice chef, and then he becomes a chef. Yeah, he's still learning new things, but he's a chef. You have someone who's an apprentice carpenter, and then he becomes a carpenter. You have someone who's a doctoral student, and then he becomes a doctor. He has a PhD, becomes a doctor. The only title that we always call him the student is the Torah scholar. Why? Because a true Torah scholar is a student of what he has wisdom in. In other words, in English, they call it, they walk the walk, don't just talk the talk. It's a non-religious professor of Talmud at Hebrew University may or may not know a lot of Talmud, but if he does, he's not a Talmid Chacham because he's not a student of what he's wise in. A Talmid Chacham is not only someone who has amassed Torah knowledge, he's someone whose life reflects that. And he lives a spiritual life based on the spirituality that he's learned. And so what you find is in our greatest Jewish scholars have the most refined character traits. They're the most refined character traits. And I've had the privilege to see things like this. It's before we even get to Rebbes, who obviously are like a epitome of this idea, and we see the kindness to Havas Yisrael. But it's there's Rabbi Bosner who studied by actually, it's actually Rabbi Smith who first took me to learn with him, even though his brother ended up spending more time with him, but as well as being one of the premier scholars in the world today, but refined character traits. We're talking about even over 20 years ago, he was on the Beis Din of Vad Mishmeres Stam. This is we'll say the roof body worldwide of all things to do with Safras, with Tefillin, Mezuzahs, and Sefer Torah. The biggest questions, the greatest questions come to this Beis Din. The most difficult and complicated issues are resolved by this Beis Din. And, I learned the laws of Safras with him. So one time we come to the class, and there's a boy who's just had his bar mitzvah, and he's waiting there, and he says, "Rabbi, can I ask you a question?" And he showed him his tefillin. He said, just had his bar mitzvah recently. He bumped the tefillin. Now, if you looked very, very, very carefully, maybe you saw there was a slight scratch in the paint, but it really wasn't that visible. It was really a nothing of a nothing. And you not only you didn't have to be on this Beis Din this high level scholar to know that there was nothing wrong with his tefillin. even have to be a student. You could be a regular person with just a basic knowledge. But this boy, he came and he shows the tefillin and says, "Oh, my tefillin is still kosher." So he took it and he looked at it very carefully, and he tells him that they're still kosher. He says, "But are they mahuda?" Meaning that, like beautiful? Is it still like a top quality? And he looked at it again, and and uh, and he told him, it's yes, they're mahuda, they're very good. And he said to him, "And it's good you came and asked. And anytime you have a question, please come and ask." And he gave the boys to fill him back. A lot of people would just take a little look and say, "Of course it's good. What are you bothering me for?" But, someone who's really a Talmud Chacham thinks about the other person, thinks about their feelings, and doesn't want to embarrass someone. And although this might not, if you discourage him with coming with this question, maybe when it's a real question, he won't come. So, this is what I mean. We say that a Talmud Chacham is not just someone who knows a lot of Torah. Talmud Chacham is an elevated person. Well, that's who we should be. So there's a positive mitzvah for every Jew to associate with the Talmud Chacham. To learn from his ways. Right? A person might not have the academic ability to be able to copy him in his scholarship. And we want to try and do that as well if we can. But what we're saying here is to associate with these people who refine themselves through their Torah study, to learn from their ways so we can be refined and holy and spiritual as well. As it says, now, literally this verse means we should cleave, we should connect to God. Now, how is it possible to physically cleave or cling to the Shekhinah, to the divine presence, a spiritual entity? How can physical connect in a way, when we're talking about this word of Davik means like glue. You actually physically connect yourself to the spiritual. Rather, our sages from the oral Torah of Mount Sinai explained to us, you know what it means? You should cleave to Talmid Chomim, loosely the Torah scholars, but these elevated people. And through cleaving to them, you yourself will learn from them, become elevated and refined, and that's how you connect to the spiritual. Through being spiritual. Therefore, a person can, he should try and marry, to try and marry the daughter of a Talmud Chacham. He should try, and that his daughter should marry Talmud Chacham. He should try and eat with them. If he does business, try and do business with the Talmud Chacham. And try and connect with them in every possible way. Right? And so, very few people could do all of these things with great people. But it's examples. In whatever way you can connect, a person should try and connect. Shnema, as it says in the verse, Ladavka boy, you should cleave to him, seemingly to Hashem, but as we explained, it means to the Talmud Chacham. Therefore, our sages commanded us, or mandated us, maybe. We should sit in the dust of their feet and drink their words thirstily. Okay, you don't really have to sit in the dust on the ground, but we don't have to be on par. We don't have to be their contemporary. We don't have to be, whatever role there is, just be in the environment as much as possible and soak it up. Soak up the environment. And we can just absorb so much just from the environment. Okay. 12. Good base. Mitzvah kol adam le'elves kol echad ve'echad misol b'kugufay. There's a mitzvah for every Jew to love every other Jew like they love their own body. Shlomo says, "V'havta l'recha kamocha." You should love your fellow Jew like yourself. Now, before it says this here, before it says what it says here, I just want to add, just by the way, to love your fellow like yourself, it first means you have to love yourself. Right? There's some people, unfortunately, that for whatever reason, they don't actually love themselves. And so if you don't really, a person, I'm going to say you, but a person doesn't really love themselves, it doesn't help to love your fellow like yourself. You know, there was a wealthy man, I forget who the tzaddik was in the story, but there was a wealthy man who used to just, he felt he's only going to eat bread and water, even though he's very wealthy. He's only going to have bread and water. He wanted to live a very simple life and not materialistic. And this rabbi, the tzaddik, he told him that he should eat a really whatever the exact menu was, but it was a hearty meal. He told him that's what he should eat every day. So he says, "How come? I'm not trying to remove from materialism." He says, "Because it's like this: if you eat bread and water, you're going to expect the poor people to survive on the dust of the earth. At least if you're eating a hearty meal, you'll realize that the poor people need your support, financial support. At least you're going to give them a basic meal, right? So a person is not even treating themselves properly. You can't treat anyone else properly. So that's the first step. A person has to have a healthy self-esteem and realize their own value. When you realize your own value, then you can see value in others. A person doesn't value themselves, he can't value anyone else. So the fichach, therefore, you should think about the person's positive. You know, the bottom line is we can all find faults in everyone because no one's perfect. Only Hashem is perfect. Only Hashem is perfect. And if we're looking for faults, we can find long list of faults in everyone. Some are real faults, some are imaginary faults, some exaggerated faults, but even the real ones, we can find faults because no one's perfect. But what we have to do is we have to look at what's positive in a person. And if we can focus on that, and we have to treat that person's property with the same concern as you would treat your own property, and treat that person's honor and respect with the same way you would treat your own honor and respect. Now, a person who tries to glorify himself by someone else's shame, putting other people down to make themselves big, this is terrible. Now, not only, even if that person that's being put down is not present, and it'll never get passed on to them, and they'll never feel embarrassed. First of all, that can happen, and sometimes it is done in front of people, and that in itself is terrible. But even in a situation where the other person's not there, and they're never going to know, and they're never going to be embarrassed, they'll never be embarrassed there. But only compared, that still is terrible. Only compared to your own deeds and your own wisdom, compared to someone else, that the only way he can make himself good is to put someone else down or to shame. This person has no share in the world to come until he does a complete teshuvah. Right? It's to make something in oneself through destroying others is maybe one of the most terrible character traits. And what ends up happening is there's no limits to it. When people start going, it's a slippery slope. When people start in this way, it can be terrible, God forbid. So as we said, this is how serious it is, even when the other person doesn't know. How much more so when people put him down to their face to make themselves big. And unfortunately, we see this, and it's often people who are insecure, and they feel the only way to make themselves big is by putting other people down. It's very sad. It's very sad. And this is why I prefaced the whole number 12 by saying that to really have a Havas Yisrael, you have to have some type of, to love others, you have to love yourself. To respect others, you have to respect yourself. That's the first step. So Yud will squeeze in 13 is continuation. Yeah, yes, David.
There's a story with the Rebbe Maharash and his older brother.
No.
Huh? Rebbe Rashab and his older brother.
Yeah.
And he put him in a hole. You want to tell the story?
Now you tell the story.
I'm trying to remember the details. So his father, the Rebbe, looked out the window and he saw his son was crying. So he saw that he was in a hole and it was next to his older brother. And the older brother explained that he put him in the hole because he was taller than him and he was trying to make him the same height, or he was trying to make himself bigger, make himself taller. So the Rebbe explained to him, you don't make yourself taller by putting the other guy down. You have to build yourself up. Don't put the other guy down to be taller, to make yourself bigger.
That's right. That's the way to do it. 13, Yud Gimel. Anyone who hates another Jew in his heart, he transgresses a negative prohibition. Shnema says, you shouldn't hate your brother in your heart. Now, sometimes it's easier said than done, because sometimes people wrong you. So if someone wrongs you and you shouldn't just hate him inwardly and keep quiet about it. Just smile and pretend that nothing happened. Like it says about Rashoim. That what happened with Avshalom, he didn't speak to Amnon, didn't say good things to him, didn't say bad things to him. He just didn't have any, he hated him, so he didn't do anything, didn't have any interaction. That's not the way to deal with it. There's a mitzvah to tell the person, what you're doing is bothering me. Or it's lama sisi likach, and ask him, why did you do such and such? Why did you wrong me with this thing? Shema says, you should rebuke your fellow. Now, what can sometimes happen is when you tell someone that something they did bothered you, or you feel you've been wronged, very often it was a misunderstanding. And the person is genuinely remorseful. I never meant to hurt you. I was just doing what I did. I didn't realize it was going to affect anyone, or I didn't realize it was going to, So just by clearing the air, sometimes that in itself can solve the problem. But even if the person, that's not the case, maybe they were aware, we have a mitzvah to try and improve people. So, if you're going to start screaming at them, calling them names, it's not going to be very helpful. But if you can come to them rationally, explain to them, this is the situation. Then if a person changes their way and they want to be forgiven, we should forgive them. He wants to be forgiven. We should forgive them and not be stubborn. Shema says, we see that Avram davened to Hashem. So we're talking about Ustihil Avimelech. This was after Avimelech kidnapped his wife. Yes, he gave his wife back. So once he gave his wife back, so the issue was over. He davened Avimelech should be healed. So we see that someone is willing to change and prove himself. We should also forgive them. Okay, it's maybe we'll pull us here. It's in the middle of a chapter, but it's a little of a paragraph. But so we run out of time for this week. So we'll continue next week, God willing.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Rabbi.
Stay safe.
You're welcome. Wish you a
Bye-bye.
wonderful week. And since I don't
Yeah.
see you till next week, wonderful Shabbos. Always
Thank
like
you
wishing
too.
people nice Shabbos on Sunday.
Have a great week. Thank you, Rebbe.
Take care. You're welcome. Take care.